It's time to hear the story, make the connection, learn the lesson, and gain the wisdom. Are you ready? Let's get charged and be changed. The Sister Speak Brother Break Show. Conversations on grace, healing, and deliverance. This is Marcy Bush. Come on, let's journey together. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Sister Speak Brother Break Show. Today, I am excited to have a guest who is a dear friend of mine. I came to know Stuart about 10 years ago, and we have done different things with a company that he's a part of, an acting company, as well as through the church. And I've come to know him and some of the things about him. He is a son, a very devoted son. He's that uncle that all the kids like to have. And he is also a businessman. He is an up and coming realtor who is making really great strides in our area. And so today he's going to talk to us about something that was a very big challenge, or is a very big challenge that he is managing in his life. And so welcome, Stuart Brooks.
Hey, Marcy.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today, Stuart.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, really sir. Is. So as always, we're going to jump right in. We're here today talking about the issues of PTSD, which is
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Anxiety and depression.
Correct.
And so can you just kind of walk us through what happened? How did it develop, or how did you find out about it? What happened in regards to that?
Well, I think I did 10 years in the military. And during my 10 years in the military, I did 11 months in Iraq. I was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Then it switched over to Operation Enduring Freedom. I was part of the first 10,000 soldiers to actually go over to Iraq in 2003 when the war first started. And at that time, my job was field artillery. So my job was, I was part of the multiple launcher rocket system. So I had to type in all the grid.
Multiple
launcher rocket system, MLRS, that's what we called it.
Okay.
And my job was actually type in the grid coordinates for whatever missile the rocket had to shoot off. So I had to type in the grid coordinates and what type of missile for them to shoot. So I think that exposure, that experience, of course, led with the PTSD, and then with the anxiety, depression is kind of like a stem or a leg of that.
Okay.
I do think there was probably some early part of anxiety and depression from childhood, but just nothing more normal than any other child may express, or teenager or anything like that. But I think that was my trigger for me.
Okay. So looking back, you said because of what you know now, you think that there was probably some manifestations of the anxiety part when you were younger. Just for our audience, for me, what types of things do you think in your life pointed at this is anxiety? Because a lot of times, especially with mental issues, mental either disorders, or what are some of the other terms that they have? I know mental illness, and we try to stay away from mental illness. There's such a stigma.
It is a huge stigma, and especially in the African American community, it's a huge stigma.
Right.
But then a subcategory context of that is even as a man. As a man is a huge.
So
huge
when you
stigma.
talk about a black man,
yes, it's a huge stigma, because you have to be so many things and then not be so many things as well.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of pressure in that is not even spoken of as well.
Right. So this is a good place. So let's talk about this for a second before we even go into the particulars, because just thinking about the term mental illness, and like I said, the stigma attached, and the almost like the panic that comes with it. And so there is such a huge stigma, like we said, that is attached to the term mental illness. However, if someone were to say physical illness, it'd be like, oh, what's wrong?
Right.
And so how do you think we can go about approaching it so that it is not, how did you, what did you do in terms of that? And like I said, we're going to go really broad and then come back in.
No, I steered away from that completely. I completely steered away from it, and to the point where I was comfortable and okay to express it. I think the biggest thing is a lot of people know people that may deal from it, but the worst thing you do is to tell that person, "Are you mentally ill?" or ask that person, "Are you mentally ill?" No, that is a trigger in itself. I think one thing is just to always be comforting to the person and stuff like that, and allow them that space.
Okay.
So if they want to share it, allow them that. But at the end of the day, even if you know the signs of it, just don't say anything, but be aware of it so you can see how you may be able to assist that person. Because that's one of the things, like I said, I never wanted to be labeled with that at the end of the day until I was okay, understanding, okay, I may have a mental illness, but that's not who I am.
Right. And see, even in regards to that, and I will be very honest and say, because I was just watching something over the past couple days, and it was talking about mental illness. It was a professional talking about mental illness and how it really is a stigma for a lot of church people too, because they either want to demonize it or tell you to pray it away or whatever. And you know, even as she was talking, and I have a definite past of depression, and so really, even just in the past couple of days, going, you know, it's easy for me to throw depression out there. But have I ever considered that was a mental, that it is a mental illness that I must navigate, that I must manage?
Yes.
And so I think part of what we're doing and just talking about it and letting them know, because a lot of times when we think mental illness, people think an institution. And if that's where you need to go, that's okay.
Right.
If we needed to go to a hospital, a medical hospital, we would go.
Yeah.
So if someone needs to go to an institution to regroup, to get what they need, that's fine.
Get your help.
Yes. But at the same time, there are people who are walking around suffering because they don't want that term. But regardless of the term or not, it's still happening.
Yes.
So now let's jump on in. So you said that we were talking about how with the anxiety, you said now that you know, you believe that there was probably some in your younger life. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I am the 7th of 9 children. Okay. Parents would have been married 52 years. So just growing up as a child, I was an extremely quiet child. And I don't remember much of my childhood, but I do remember looking back at family photos. And for some reason, I never used to like looking at the camera.
Okay.
I always hid from the camera. And every single family picture, you'll see my head is turned away or stuff like that, when I just like, I never knew what it was until like, okay, maybe there was some anxiety then at that moment.
Okay.
But honestly, I don't know where it came from, but I do remember like, okay, being a child feeling a certain type of way or getting overly excited or overly anxious about things. And then like, okay, what I do with all this? And most, they were like, oh, all that energy as a child. But no, that was a form of anxiety at that time that maybe my parents didn't know about or stuff like that. But I think that's where, as a child, where I see some signs of anxiety when I was younger.
Okay. And so then you said it was kind of a dormant kind of thing or not heightened until you were in the war in Iraq.
Correct.
And so did it manifest while you were away at war, or were you so in the moment, so in the scene of where you were? Did it manifest then, or did it wait until you came back home?
It waited until I came back. But the thing is, when you're in war, it's overly sensitive, it's overly heightened. That anything,
you don't even realize you're
not at all, because it's mission first.
Okay.
It's stay alive.
Okay.
It is completely stay alive. I've never shared my war story outside of therapy.
Okay.
Outside of therapy.
Okay.
Only because no one actually realized I was the first 10,000 soldiers. We was flying overseas and had to stop because the bombs flew down. So we went there and landed in Iraq and in Kuwait, excuse me. And so my job as in the soldier was was the person to drive my colonel. So I was a driver. Okay. I took my job serious. Just how I am. You give me a job, a task to do, I'm going to do it. Right. So from going to Kuwait to Iraq, I drove 36 hours straight in a Humvee. If my job is to protect everyone in this vehicle, that's what I'm going to do. Right. To the point where I'm like, they was like, Brooks, you okay? I'm good. To the point where they literally had to take my hands off the steering wheel. Okay.
Okay.
And to the point where now, after the fact, I'm like, okay, if I'm driving somewhere, I like to drive.
I got you.
If we're going on long trips, I want to drive. Because I used to say this jokingly, I trust me as a driver, so y'all don't have to worry about anything.
Right.
But I know that's where that particular thing stands for, along with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Okay. And I thank you for sharing. I do. I thank you for sharing with us, for trusting us.
Yeah.
I thank you for being willing to expose yourself to help others get help.
Yeah.
That's huge, and I appreciate that. So, like you said, when you're in war, everything is heightened. So that is the norm.
Yes. Like I have so many war stories. Got to Iraq, like I said, we had the in the tank. In training, when we was taking, I was in front of a computer typing the grid coordinates and stuff like that. I got so good at it when they gave me grid coordinates. While I was typing, they had maps in the tank. I could type and look at the grid coordinates and say, okay, that's where it's going to land. When we got over to Iraq, they took all the maps out the tanks. And one missile would take out a grid square. So that meant that sound like much, but one grid square that we used was 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters.
Okay.
So, and I was in the desert, middle of the desert. We was there for like over 29 days. We set up our camp, did a little round circle. There, walking around and stuff like that. Once we left and went to another facility, there was another unit that came and occupied the exact same spot that we were. 4 people died. It was a landmine. That we were there for 27 days.
Oh my gosh.
Walking around.
Wow.
So just stuff like that.
Yes. So grace. These are conversations on grace, healing, and deliverance. That is the grace of God. Lord. Okay. And so again, that whole heightened everything
sense.
is heightened.
Heightened sense. Then was on task force operation and op force. So my job was, if the perimeter was attacked, we had to load up the Humvee, go to the perimeter, and handle what was ever out there.
Okay.
So you be in bed, 2 o'clock in the morning, hear the alarm, you got to gear up, get in that Humvee. So at that point, I was either driving or I was on top of the Humvee holding the 50 cal. And the 50 cal is a machine gun that has a bullet in it that's probably about this big. So whatever the threat that was out there, we had to handle it.
Okay.
And I had to handle several threats several different times.
Okay.
So experiencing that, knowing that, okay, if your gun went off and you had to shoot it, there was something else at the end of it that you had to handle. And then along with that task force, actually going out into the villages. Like you may see in the movies and stuff like that, but being the lead person where you literally had to kick in a door. Okay. And then after you kick in the door, you already was an arm. Okay. So doing that for 11 months. There was a time that me and my buddy Gibbs was on top of a mill truck, which is like an 18-wheeler back of the truck. We had a 12-hour guard duty. And so we're just having a conversation, good friend of mine, and then all of a sudden we see lights off to our pass, and it's a vehicle. And at that time, our direct orders were, if we see anything, to call it in. We called it in to some Marines people, and they took it out, and they said it was Iraqis in a vehicle. They had their guns pointed right at us.
Lord.
So just situation like that, experiencing for 11 months.
Yes. And so then you come home. And now just knowing what I know of you from the past 10 years. Yeah. And I know your diligence, I know your commitment, but I wouldn't see you as like having to be the aggressor. Now I know you can attack what you need to attack, but I'm just saying, once you went into that position, had you seen that in you, not even talking about as far as weaponry and using all that, but just that ability to zone in and out. Did you see that before you went into the military?
I was always detail oriented, but that just made it even more point to and it had to, because at the end of the day, one mishap is not only your life, but it's someone else's life. Yes. Someone else's life. You know, we had to drive in convoys, and to the point where you're driving the convoys and the car in front of you blow up, vehicle behind you blow up, and the only thing you have to do is just keep going forward, called up higher, and
Okay.
So
Okay.
situations like that, I could go on with stories.
Yes.
They've given us briefing and saying that you can't. You see the villagers come up to you with little kids. You can't hand them out food or nothing like that because they usually put bombs on their kids.
Okay. Okay. Wow. And so you come back home. Tell me about coming back home.
Well, before I come back home, that was in 2003. I still had one more year of service to do, and I did my one more year. And it's, it's different because that environment, that one last year I did, everyone experienced the same thing I did.
Okay.
So, it was a camaraderie. But coming back home in 2005, completely detached.
Okay.
Completely. It's like a foreign world.
All right.
The military provided everything for you. To eat, where to be at. Every second of your day mostly was already accounted for and you knew what to do. So coming back home was like, okay, now what do I do? And it took me a while to find a time, but there was probably about a whole month period. I know my mom was like, okay, what's wrong with this boy?
Okay.
But I literally remember I had my best friend, who's still my best friend today. I met in Oklahoma. When I came back home, I didn't talk to him for probably about 6 months.
Oh.
And to the point where I stopped taking his calls, and to this day he still gets me on it, but it just completely dissociated. I remember going outside and just walking in the yard for hours.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel anything.
Gotcha.
Then at that point, when I was able to, because I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I didn't.
Right,
I didn't know what it was. I just know I came back home and I didn't feel normal. Can't talk about it to nobody because it's the last thing they wanted to say to be labeled a certain type of way.
Right.
So what I did was I worked.
Okay.
Let me detach myself from my feelings and my thought process. So I worked. So I ended up getting 3 jobs.
You became a workaholic.
Workaholic. One full-time, 40 hours a week, one part-time job, and then I was still in the military and the reserves. So 3 jobs, and this was literally 25, 24 years old.
Okay. So besides even, you said 25 or 24 at that time. So besides even the things like you just walking around the yard or just kind of, what did the detachment, were you able to even make the connections with your family? I know if it wasn't people outside the home yet, but what about inside?
Inside the home, I knew how to put on a face. One thing, I wasn't feel arterial. It was a all male unit. So the thing they taught you was just drive on. There was no feelings in the military. Okay. There was no feelings at all. Okay. That was a sign of weakness. They've gotten over it now, but then you broke your leg, doesn't like that. Suck it up, soldier. Drive on. So that's why I have to be careful now, because sometimes I can be like, "What you mean? Okay,
Yes.
Suck it up." You know what I'm saying? So
right.
I had to learn compassion.
Okay.
Because at the point, so that's why. But the thing is, I didn't have any for myself either.
Right. Which is big.
Yeah.
So how did it manifest? What are some of the things? Because you gave us those war stories while you were in Iraq. What's your war story when you came back home? What were some of those incidents?
Just trying to get back to socializing with people. I was gone for probably about 4 years, so it wasn't that long time with friendships and stuff like that. So come back to calling friends, hey, how you doing? Back, da da da. To like me picking up the phone to call somebody was so hard because I didn't feel normal. Okay. But not knowing what it was, and then feeling like asking for help, I can't do that. I'm a soldier.
Okay.
I'm a soldier. So literally, I felt trapped.
Okay.
Felt trapped.
Okay.
I literally, I came back in 2005. Yeah. And when I was in Oklahoma, my spiritual life is important to me. So it was, I had found a good church in Oklahoma and stuff like that. But when I got back, I tried to go back to my home church, but I love them. But
right.
what I got connected with,
it didn't fit for you.
It didn't fit for me. So I literally was without a place of worship for almost 5 years.
Okay.
So I didn't have that spiritual component.
Right.
I just worked.
Okay.
And so that was a big void. So I was walking around almost lifeless for just
More
going through the
like a
motions.
shell.
Yeah, just like a shell. I would work and stuff like that, but people didn't know on the inside, like, screaming for help and not knowing how to ask for it.
And so, what are some of the things that led you to say, yo, I gotta get help?
When I felt I was losing the connections that mattered to me, you know, when I didn't feel like I'm doing everything I think I know how to do, but something's not right. Financially, things were an issue, because I think another thing with the anxiety and depression was, okay, I didn't matter, so I would help everybody else. So, and to that point where, like, no, I got to do something, because this is not right. This is not how life is supposed to be.
Right.
You know, where I'm working, I'm living, but after work, I'm literally going home and getting in my bed just to do everything else over again.
Okay. And so, how did you take that first step? Because you did seek therapy, you did seek help, and so how did that go about? How did you feel at the beginning of that?
The beginning of therapy was hard, but I think before the therapy, I think my lowest point was there was a suicide moment.
Okay.
And that moment, I was like, nope. It didn't work, but it was an attempt. Yep.
So it wasn't a thought anymore.
No, it was an attempt.
Okay.
It was a complete attempt, and of course, not going to detail it because I don't want anybody ideas.
Right.
But went through with it, did everything, but just it didn't work, and I was like, you know what? On the other side of it, I'm like, I can't do that, because if I ever did again, it may work.
Right.
So and I'm calling, getting therapy, and that's all I knew to do. Let me set up a therapy appointment through the VA. They're supposed to help.
Right.
And we'll see. And I kind of fought back. Because I'm like, what do you mean, no? You're supposed to help me. What I mean, I got to talk and express. I'm not taught to do that.
Okay.
You doctor, tell me what to do. Why would you mean I got to tell you how I feel? No.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
To the point where I just end up, after I went for almost 2 years, weekly. For almost 2 years, to the point where I had, if I wanted to get help, I had to put the work in.
Okay, but you saw that putting the work in began to help you?
It did, yeah. It began to help me. I started feeling better. There was medication they prescribed to me, but that didn't work for me. But medication, I'm an advocate for it. But I ended up finding alternate routes that did just me. Like I said, finding the church where I'm at now, and with that, along with my therapy, changed my life.
Okay.
Changed my life.
So therapy and getting in touch with, well, like you said, being at the right place makes all the difference.
And that's what my therapist has told me. You know, saying therapy helps, but you know, saying from what he could hear, he could tell that I was a religious person, a spiritual person, saying that, you know, get connected to a place of worship. And so I was connected, but getting more involved.
Yes, that's good. Are there any things that you would like to say? Because we have a little segment that we're going to do in a little bit, where little fast questions. But even before we get to that, are there any things that you would like to, what would you share with someone who may be experiencing the PTSD, anxiety, or depression, or a combination of those, or any other mental illness?
I think it would be find people you can trust. Okay. It's so important, even if it's just one person, and that you feel like you can trust, and let them have a small peek inside. The hardest thing is even opening up an inch, because the worst thing you want to do is feel a burden or be labeled something. I never forget one story where it almost completely shut me down. Is I was out of town with some friends, and one of my things with my anxiety is I didn't notice I was doing it until later, was when I would get home from work, it would be so hard for me to unwind. To the point where I would get home, probably take my shoes off and start cleaning, start folding and stuff like that. And I realized it's like 2 or 3 hours later, and I have not sat down. Okay. And to the point I did that out of town, where I think we had just left from a concert or whatever, came back to the hotel room, and we was talking about it, stuff like that. And somebody said, Stuart, you hadn't sat down for a minute. But someone else in the room said, don't worry about it, he's just crazy. Okay. And it hit me so hard. because they didn't know what I was dealing with.
Right.
But I was like, okay, Stuart, you know, other people started noticing. It almost shut me down where I didn't want to be. But I said, you know what? You got to be careful with it. So one person is find out who you can trust, but more so to the people that if you feel like someone may be dealing with something like that, be observant, but be a soft place for them.
Yes. 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 That's good advice. Very good advice. Are there any other things that you there? And there's so many.
But I think so.
many
Also, as speaking as a man or male, you have to find another guy that you can share with.
Okay.
No offense, you know, saying to the females, to the women, we love y'all share, but it's something about for a man to be vulnerable.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? We're not going to do that much, honestly, in front of a female. We, you know, saying too much, especially if it's a relationship they're trying to build or stuff like that, because there's so many stigmas that are even with a black male. But finding a brotherhood or another guy that you can actually open up with and share, even if it's not even talking about mental illness, some place where you can feel naturally 100% yourself with another guy makes all the difference.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, you know, okay, this person genuinely accepts me, even if I may have a moment or a trigger moment and stuff like that. I feel comfortable enough that I can probably handle that with them, and I can be okay with that. I just need one good place where I could have landed and knew someone had me. Then I can take over the world.
Yes. Yes. That's okay. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word peace?
Comfort.
What did these disorders teach you about yourself?
I'm stronger than I think I am.
That's good. And if there was only one takeaway that people could, once the show ends, that they could take with them, what would you want it to be?
I think that even with that statement, you're stronger than you think you are. Everything that you have gone through, you've gone through it.
Yes.
It hasn't taken you out.
Yes. That's good. That's good. Appreciate your vulnerability today and your openness and your willingness to be vulnerable so that others can receive help. And I know that God is going to use your testimony to help somebody else be able to tap into theirs.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So y'all, we thank you for joining us for the Sister Speak Brother Break show. We hope that you'll come see us again next week. Be blessed. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you've been blessed by today's show, feel free to let us know. And if you'd like to sow into this ministry, become a sponsor, or contact us, you can reach us at 803-221-0169. Or you can email us at thessbbshow@gmail.com. Let's continue this journey together.
For kids in the neighborhood, and I glanced, and when I glanced, I seen them. Okay. And I remember I just took off running to my grandma's house, ran in and slammed the door, locked it, and laid on the living room floor. And I felt like I was paralyzed, like I could not move.